Fei Ch'ien Rinse Out, Sino-futurist Undercurrency by Steve Goodman, from Plea, Warwick Journal of Philosophy, Volume 7. This text from CCRU.net. 1. The Death of a Thousand Cuts is an encryption system for cleansing professed traitors of the Hung Triads. Cleansing involves draining every drop of blood from the victim's body through an intricately timed numerical system of 1,000 incisions. In Chinese they say, only the mighty 7, which is death, keeps 3, which is creation, pure. 2. The global war machine sets its sights on a new type of enemy, no longer another state, or even another regime, but the unspecified enemy, multiform, maneuvering, and omnipresent. The unassignable material saboteur, or human deserter assuming the most diverse forms. 3. All war is based on deception. 4. Sino-futurism is a dark-side cartography of the turbulent rise of East Asia. It connects seemingly heterogeneous elements onto the topology of planetary capitalism, on digital maps sent back from Shaolin, a satellite entity orbiting somewhere outside history. The modern Occident appears as irrigated through a modernity of thermodynamic industrialist aggression. When the modern nation-state bought its war machines, splitting a constitutive power into a double articulation between political aims and militarized means, it adopted a state-centered martial mode. But the regulation and prohibition of means has, for a long time, been known as the best recipe for turbulence control as a catalyst of non-linearity. It was not surprising, therefore, when the means, through unprecedented investment in constant and variable capital, in a flash, emerged from the depths of the strata, dragging with it the intestines that had held it in place, pulling the inside of the state onto the outside. Thereby, Clausewitz's formula was reversed, relegating component states into mere conduits for a planetary military cybernetic machine. Phase change. Program catastrophe surfing on pure war. Turbulence simulation. A war against positive feedback, quantizing it as amplification within an invariable metric, and establishing a cybernetic of stability fortified against the future. Postmodern control is based on the undecided proposition because, after the absolute peace of the Cold War, the enemy to the human security system is a polytendrilled abomination, into which the state is always becoming, of transnational trade, warlords, narco-syndicates, and millennial death cults. At this precise point, Sun Tzu rushes in from Shaolin, with tactical cuts on the CNS of the Occidental mega-machine as it mutates into informational ice. 5. The modern human security system might even have appeared with Weiner's subliminal insight that everything cyber-positive is an enemy of mankind, evolving out of a work on weaponry guidance systems. His was an attempt to enslave cybernetics to a general defense technology against alien invasion. Cybernetics was itself to be kept under a control that was itself not cybernetic. It was as if his thinking were guided by a blind tropism of evasion, away from another, deeper, runaway process, from a technics losing control and a communication with the outside of man. 6. Cut. When Weiner sanctifies Leibniz as the dawn of cybernetics for animating the triadic geometrism of Spinoza's ethics, he wages war on the outside. Weiner's cybernetics consisted of on-off electrical switches, a Boolean algebra of classes based on the yes-no of inside or outside a class. The crucial point of convergence was Leibniz's elucidation of the binary counting system. When Leibniz had developed this, he sent some transcripts to his Jesuit correspondent in China, Bouvet. In return, Bouvet sent Leibniz a copy of the I Ching, thinking he would be amazed to see that his binary system had been circulating for millennia. Leibniz was so affected as to hallucinate it as evidence as some kind of universalist triumph. he reroutes creation through a Neo-Confucianist I Ching of binary arithmetic. I think the substance of the ancient theology of the Chinese is intact and, purged of additional errors, can be harnessed to the great truths of Christian religion. It would seem, therefore, that Leibniz organizes Spinoza's substance as Confucius codes a Tao. Neo-Confucianism becomes a mega-organism of the monadology. The God is a binary machine of the yin-yang, while hiding a dark side cosmic cartography of the matrix. Spinoza's substance, or the machinic phylum. It should be noted that Deleuze's Leibniz is more resilient, an organicism taken to such psychedelic extremes that it takes merely a nudge to open it out onto a topology of morals. The monadology unfolds into the nomadology. 7. Shaolin takes the I Ching for software assigning the number 3 as the immobile motor of the encryption system. In the I Ching, the hexagrammic production process involves a chaotic flow of numbers. A trigram involves 2 machinic components, rigid unbroken lines, supple broken lines. The rigid and broken lines correspond to yang and yin, respectively. Either of these lines can be lines of becoming in that period of transition, which makes it impossible to speak of the yin-yang as dialectic. Trigrams, or gua, are composed of 3 lines stacked upon each other. In piles of 3, the possible configurations are 23 equals 8. Around these lines function a 64, 82 piece system comprised of all the possible permutations. A hexagram cartography maps the nonlinear dynamics of exteriority, self-organization in smooth space, the onset of turbulence, and the folding of stratification. As with a computer, the I Ching samples the actual and runs it through a binary system. In materialist hyperreality, simulation is not a loss of the real, a postmodern idealist nihilism, but the intervention of the virtual reality into the actual reality. Reality is always a machinic production. 8. Oriental and Occidental stratification meet on the plane of organization. According to Wiener, Leibniz replaces the pair of corresponding elements, mind and matter, by a continuum of corresponding elements, the monads. While these are conceived after the pattern of the soul, they include many instances which do not arise to the degree of self-consciousness of full souls, and which form part of that world which Descartes would have attributed to matter. Each of them lives in its own closed universe, with a perfect causal chain from the creation, or from minus infinity in time, to the indefinitely remote future. But closed though they are, they correspond one to the other through the pre-established harmony of God. Leibniz compares them to clocks, which have been wound up as to keep time together from the creation for all eternity. Unlike humanly made clocks, they do not drift into asynchronism. But this is due to the miraculously perfect workmanship of the Creator. Like Hobbes' Leviathan, where the man state is an organism, with the embryonic bourgeois monetary capillary system as irrigated network of blood, Wiener points out how in Leibniz's fractal monadology, his treatment of the living organism as really a plenum, wherein other living organisms, such as the blood corpuscles, have their life, runs along that same plane, scarcely more than a philosophical anticipation of the cell theory, according to which most of the animals and plants of moderate size, and all those of large dimensions, are made up of units, cells, which have many, if not all, the attributes of independent living organism, building bricks of organisms of a higher stage. 9. East-west coast stratification, twinned, organisms on every scale. For non-organic or machinic desire, exterior to any system of transgression, law or lack, pods equals politically organized defensive systems, modeled upon the polis. Pods hierarchically delegate authority through public institutions, family and self, seeking metaphorical sustenance in the corpuscular fortifications of organisms and cells. The global human security allergy to cyber revolution consolidates itself in the New World Order, or consummate macropod, inheriting all the resources of oppression as concrete collective history. 10. The last organs fall off leper earth, revealing sockets of mangled circuitry and coagulated blood, dispersing out through transcarcerative planominal veins. Drug rush, energy rush, artillery through the arteries. Heroin goes triadic. The veins ice over and crack. Carried along by the breakbeats of a cosmic secret numeracy, a whole dark side network of trade and relays from the Orient infiltrate the Occident. An intricate system of cuts. Sino-futurism is the acupuncture of the West into planetary schizophrenia. The transfer from Empire of China to Empire of the South is never ending. 11. 500 years of modernity fades when the weaving of the bamboo mats converges with the manufacture of computer games in the streets of Bangkok, Taipei, and Shanghai. The silicon links were already there. Cybernetics is not just about technical machines. Information warfare is not just about cyberspace. Its fundamental element is virtual reality, but an array of practical religions have been surfing it for many millennia. This is perhaps why so much of the new science of complexity is ceaselessly converging with the cosmic materialism of voodoo, tantrism, Zen, and the Chinese martial arts, pointing to non-Western influences on cybernetics and the emergent lines of a future beyond the pale. Situated on this continuum, information warfare is stripped down to a war of perceptions, hacking, jamming, and stealth tactics in the nervous system, whether it be planetary telecommercial networks or the human organism. As Virilio puts it, quote, weapons are tools not just of destruction, but also of perception. That is to say, stimulants that make themselves felt through chemical, neurological processes in the sense organs and the central nervous system, affecting human reactions and even the perceptual identification and differentiation of objects. End quote. It is in this respect that narcotics can be considered as a soft plague, infecting the nervous system of commodity cybernetics. A global capitalism fighting its own drug markets is a horror autotoxicus, an autoimmune disease. Drug control is the attempt by the human species to control the uncontrollable, control escalation itself, tropisms programmed by the aliens. The human security apparatuses experiment with drugs as weapons and tools. Their soldiers are stoned, energized, and anesthetized on a range of prescribed and proscribed pharmaceuticals. Their irregular forces are subsidized by narcotics revenue. The war against drugs is a war on drugs. For Paul Virilio, Sun Tzu is a rumbling undercurrent. In fact, it is Sun Tzu who invents his notion of pure war, mediating in Shaolin for 2.5 millennia, waiting for its actualization in military cybernetics. The reason why The Art of War by Sun Tzu is a toolbox at the cutting edge of cybernetic capitalism, from business to military strategists, is that it contains an abstract flowchart or a fluid physics for survival far from equilibrium, a tactics for turbulence, camouflage, imperceptibility, speed. Be so subtle that you are invisible. Be so mysterious that you are intangible. Then you will control your rival's fate. 12. Neo-China arrives from the future, or has been arriving ever since it was bypassed by European militarized capital, despite a much stronger degree of technological development. As Manuel de Landa puts it, the Europe of 1494 was in a process of solidification, as if the different political entities that comprise Europe had existed in a fluid form and were now crystallizing to a solid shape, in contrast with rival empires, Chinese, Ottoman, which for reasons of geography and religion had developed a mostly uniform crystal. Europe never solidified into one piece, but rather into a broken conglomerate with shifting boundaries. As stress built up along these cracks and fissures, it was relieved in the form of armed conflict, following the lines of least resistance. And it was indeed the dynamical nature of the broken crystal that allowed Western societies to surpass China and Islam in the competition to conquer the world. 13. Slow-release protracted war run from Shaolin. Shaolin is Swarm Catalyzer, programming triad syndicated film production in Hong Kong, Golden Triangle poppy production, Kowloon chemical distillation, and encrypted planetary distribution networks rinsing out global finance, and San Franciscan laundromats. Shaolin orchestration the Golden Triangle turns the opium war against itself through those intricate incisions. Routes opened by numeric rhythms and continuous variation. Chinese narcotic syndicates operate on the dark side of the Guangxi rhizome of Chinese informal trading markets. Secret cartography, secret money, secret composition. Unknown chemicals to rewire the nervous systems for the 21st century, when all the instruments of spying, deception, are put in place and functioning smoothly. The lords of the rim shall run the celestial web. As Sterling Seagrave points out, Sino-futurism is less an issue of the Chinese state in future core conflict. Not that this is not of massive importance to the trajectory of the world system, but the vast overseas population which runs Southeast Asia and produces internal Souths and Occidental megalopian jungles. 14. Mobius. The encrypted plane is folded into a plane of organization, a twin-headed multiscalar capture complex generating closed circuits or laminal turfs extorted by the state and micro-despotic syndicate protection rackets. States, clans, and gangs plug together under the dark sun of total annihilation. A symbiotics of markets and anti-markets. Narco-capital twists prohibition against itself through escalative waves of mass addiction beyond control, which brings states into complementary relation with crime syndicates in those kleptocratic elements, which operate as an anti-market territorial protectionism and the extortion of rent. Protection is a mini-despotic service, a vernacular welfarism founded on micro-monopolies of martial potential, Turkish, Sicilian, Russian mafia, Jamaican gangsters, Mexican and Colombian cartels, Japanese yakuza, Chinese triads. It all mixes in the blood of the junkie. 15. Deleuze and Guattari's nonlinear social evolution attempts a radical break from evolution itself. All we need to do is combine these abstract evolutions to make all evolutionism crumble, running a tendential system from the territorialized and coded Earth to the decoding and deterritorializing planet. Capitalism is seen to retrochronically rework the whole of history, which is composed of a coexisting continuum of rigid lines, broken lines, and line of becoming, with their corresponding modes of social segmentarity, regimes of signs, modes of numeracy, and relation to speed, space-time. It constitutes not historical resolution, but a descent into the maelstrom, down the spiraling slopes into the matrix. But neither does a new world disorder become the substitute telos of social transformation. From the standpoint of a whimsical evolutionism, according to which packs are low on the scale and are superseded by the state or familial societies. On the contrary, there is a difference in nature. The organization of packs is entirely different from that of families and states. They continually work them within and trouble them from without, with other forms of content, other forms of expression. 16. The onset of turbulence. From molecular streams seeping from the dams of Occidental ice to high-bandwidth cables plugged straight into the heart of the jungle, pumping alternating currents of cocaine, opium, guns, cash, and information into the warped stratoplex of the core. A planomal jungle topology traced as a tropical geometry of golden crescents and triangles feeding the internal south. Narcotic trade is guerrilla swarm machine, becoming imperceptible, becoming flea, but territorial fleas. Dog fleas. Subterranean networks of molecular distribution, deterritorializing the apparatus of statist commodity control, but reterritorializing as micro-statist Oedipal organized crime syndicates. Statist and micro-statist drug enforcement agencies in ostensible opposition. White economies versus black markets. Poles of mutually legitimately cybernetic interaction, operating territorial protectionism. The internal South is not neo-primitive, but does breed modes of collectivity the band, pack, or gang type. In capitalism and schizophrenia, the primitive machine is coded and territorialized on the earth. but its supple segmentarity, its mechanisms put in place to ward off tendencies of stratification, are not confined to hunter-gathering societies. That is to say, its abstract machine is not underdeveloped, disorganized, or tied to the infancy of history. The permutations of segmentarity are stretched out on a virtual continuum of coexistence. The body without organs is a sample bank out of which history extracts its flows, is the engine which makes a social flea all over the place. And this is why Paul Virilio, in Speed and Politics, describes the function of the police as highway patrol, the regulation of escape velocities, of tangential calculus, manufacturing homeostasis, axiomatics, the unspecified enemy, propositions undecidable. On this continuum, banditry, piracy, gangs, police, and state war machines are merely differences in consistency, composition, and speed. This topology twists the traditional theory of organized crime upside down. Instead of the pyramidal mafia hierarchy run by the mini-despot who orchestrates the tendrils of the black market with political corruption and the threat of violence, the abstract machine of disorganized crime works bottom up along the lines of viral contagion and autoimmune response. Markets resonate in anti-markets. Rhizomes aborified by rhizomaniacs. 17. Chinese crime syndicates are not nomad war machines. There is too much engagement in micro-fascism for that. But its blade politics generate accidental effects, crucially in distinction from the fascist morality of the scalpel. Instead of the lancing of cancerous growths on the social body, their incisions into the Occident accelerates trade through the protective shell of the Western Bodily Organization, WBO. But even in Shaolin, the mission was always ambivalent, assisting the Empire in fighting off the invading Eluth Mongols, and after World War II, against the Mao's guerrilla swarm machine, while maintaining a secret organization always in tension with the imperial bureaucracy. 18. An entwined composition oscillating between mega and war machinic modes. Undoubtedly, it is the war machinic threads that prove educational to Sino-futurism. For Deleuze and Guattari, the war machine is diagrammed by an occult numeracy which forges secret pathways, imperceptible to the eye of power, between the nomad war machine and the apparatus of capture. The issue is not at all anarchy versus organization, not even centralism versus decentralization, but a calculus or conception of the problems of non-denumerable sets against the axiomatic of denumerable sets, in opposition to the numbered number which measures the movement of bodies in space. The numbering number lubricates collective vectors through layers of social sedimentation. Nomad numeracy is an abstract machine giving a distributed population a dynamic consistency, swarm machinic encryption. For illegal syndicates and guerrilla groups, morphological fluidity are essential. In the war machine and nomadic existence, the number is no longer numbered, but becomes a cipher, and it is this capacity that it constitutes the esprit de corps and invents the secret and its outgrowths, strategy, espionage, war ruses, ambush, diplomacy, etc. 19. Triad organization engages a coding system at odds with that of the state, even though this informal network can still be seen to crisscross through the higher echelons of an array of corrupt political elites. The numbering number, in other words, autonomous arithmetic organization, appears as soon as one distributes something in space. Instead of dividing up space or distributing space itself, the number becomes a subject. The independence of the number in relation to space is a result not of abstraction, but of the concrete nature of smooth space, which is occupied without being counted. The number is no longer a means of counting, but of moving. Cosmic secrecy requires a multiscalar encryption system, sidestepping Occidental evolution to hot link into the matrix. 20. Another economy of violence, another cruelty, and encrypted memotechnics. Members are coded through initiation ceremonies, which draw new components of the collective assemblage into the consistency of the triad machinery. A secret semiotics of the body allows undetected transfers of information, fluid lines of escape under the camouflage of officialdom or legality. The secret handshake is a transversal interlock, disengaging professional masks to conduct a dark side flow of cash, information, software, electronics, hardware, narcotics, and weaponry. When the Lodge Father had accepted Piet's tea and Young's salute, he stood to attention, placing his left hand slightly below his chest, with thumb, third, and little fingers outstretched. His index and fourth fingers were bent under his palm. It was a secret sign which only a Lodge Father may use. Young Ming replied by putting his own hand on the identical portion of his body, the thumb and the little finger outstretched, and the other 3 fingers kept tucked beneath the palm. He thereby returned the secret sign of a branch leader. Then they bowed deeply to each other. 21. To the triads, the number 3 is of central significance, both mathematically and mystically. 3 multiplied by 3, 3 squared, equals 9, and any number that adds up to 9 is divisible by 9. For example, 1,804,563, which reduces to 9 by adding all the digits together, 27, and then adding the result together, 2 plus 7 equals 9. To the Chinese, 3 is a mystical number denoting the balance between heaven, earth, and man. Triadic machine coding attributes to each officer rank a numerical code, which begins with a 4. Basic members are known as Zukai, or 49s. Shanchu is 489. The Fu Shanchu, Huangchu, Xinfeng, and Shuangfa officers, all equal in rank, are 438. The Hung Quang is 426, Pa Tsit-sin is 415, Cho Hai is 432. Lodge leaders are termed 489s, and also 21s. 4 plus 8 plus 9. 21 is also 3, number of creation, multiplied by 7, both the number of death and lucky number. The coding encrypted into the leader therefore inscribes the abstract machine, or phase space of the whole system in actuality. Also significant, the incense master, 438, is 15, 4 plus 3 plus 8. 3 multiplied by 5, or creation, longevity, preservation, maps onto his function in Lodge ritual as conductor of future history. The internal consistency of this numeracy is significant, in that it offers a mode of composition lubricating the movement of bodies in space. Through jungles to covert chemical and software factories, to towering megacorporations as accountants, lawyers, stockbrokers, and most notably the police itself. For as Martin Booth points out, a triad lodge rarely has a permanent location. Interpol once described the triad structure as a several-storied building, in which the inhabitants of one floor don't know where the stairs are to the next floor. Despite global reach, the triads vary from other syndicates in that, while Hong Kong, especially after return to China, serves as catalytic HQ, there is no overreaching administration. Globally, the 3 most powerful factions of the 14K, the Sun Yi On, and the Wo Hop To. Each lodge is for the most part autonomous, even from the other 14K lodges, for example. Difficult to penetrate, subterranean imperceptibility has a long history for gangs associated with the ancient martial arts. 22. Opium was not a problem for China until Occidental infiltration in the late 18th and 19th centuries. China had much that the West desired: tea, silk, cotton, spices, and rice. England, the major mercantile force of the period, had to pay for goods in silver bullion, which fluctuated wildly in terms of price and supply. Through East India Company opium injected through the skin, the direction of trade reversed as the drug seeped into every pore. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, all the major financial institutions, which persist today, were instituted on the loot: Debt & Co., Butterfeld & Swire, Hutchinson & Co., and Jardine, Matheson & Co. As Martin Booth tells us, all these firms were founded on opium. The taxation on opium trade imposed by the Chinese government generated the underground network subsequently plowed by the triads, who made almost as much money as the English did. When in 1915, the British ceased importing opium into China, the French continued to traffic and began cultivating their own sources of supply in northwestern Vietnam and eastern Laos. French advisors made contact with the May and Yao Hill tribes, teaching them to grow, harvest, and market opium, and thus was the Golden Triangle born. The basis for all this was, of course, silver. During 1837, for example, the British sent 2.4 million kilograms of opium to China. Each kilo of opium was worth 5 taels of silver. Thus, approximately 10 million taels of silver were transmitted abroad in a single year. 23. In the latter half of the Tang dynasty, a growing tea commerce between the south and the imperial capital began to underscore the necessity for convenience to exchange. In response, a medium poetically named flying money, Fei Ch'ien, evolved. Provincial governors maintained memorial offering courts at the capital. Southern merchants paid the money they made from the sale of goods at the capital to these courts, which then used it to pay the tax quotas due from the southern provinces to the central government. In return, the courts issued the merchant with a certificate. When the merchant returned home, he presented this certificate to the provincial government and was paid an equivalent sum of money. Thus did both the merchant and the local government avoid the risk of inconvenience of carrying quantities of copper or silk. 24. Fei Ch'ien Rinse Out. Extensive underground banking networks running through gold shops, trading companies, and money changers, where record-keeping procedures are virtually non-existent, and trade takes on the camouflage of coded chip messages, simple telephone transfers, and nested systems of coding encrypted for travel in cyberspace. One Hong Kong police official has stated that he once seized a piece of paper with a picture of an elephant on it that represented the collection receipt for $3 million at a Hong Kong gold shop. Hong Kong has neither central bank nor currency exchange controls, thus virtually eliminating the possibility of tracing funds entering or leaving Hong Kong. It is a financial secrecy jurisdiction whereby disclosure of data is illegal. Drug traffickers, like all good investors, prefer to diversify their assets and invest in legit business, concealing the hot link between globe-trotting funds and source crimes. A petri dish for breeding commercial war machines. For example, first, cash generated from importations to the US was moved back to Hong Kong, where it was held in a number of bank accounts under false names of individuals or businesses. The bank was BCCI. The approach appears simple. Cash, usually in amounts of approximately $1 million US, was taken to a money transmission company in the US. The most often used is a company called Piano, which is known for its Colombian cocaine connections. These amounts were then transferred to Bankers Trust and simply transferred telegraphically to the various Hong Kong BCCI accounts, one of which was sarcastically called Launderland. Overseas banks, left with piles of small bills, then shipped them back to the US in exchange for larger bills. The consistent increase in US currency repatriated from Hong Kong to the US from 1982 to the first half of 1984 strikingly correlated with a steady increase in Southeast Asian heroin marketed in the US from 1981 to 1983. This volume of smaller denomination bills exceeds the total volume of all currency transactions with any European country, and the flow of US currency from the US to Hong Kong is minimal when compared to the reverse flow of US currency from Hong Kong. 25. When the battleground is in cyberspace, deception is not merely about mass, but functions in numerical operations flat with the terrain. Money laundering and secret crime societies were always waiting for the vast encryption system that constitutes the Internet. Planetary electronic networks compress space-time into vectors of pure speed, emanating a protean geography traversed by torrents of electron flow coded into zeros and ones. From the dark side of the military cybernetics complex, cyberspace is a vast digital capital laundromat, facilitating short circuits through the ice of the world banking system of the New World Order. Money communicates with the primary process because of what it can melt, not what it can obtain. Welcome to the jungle. 26. Euro dread for the end of man. As the CIA hacked into the jungle, cutting its share of Golden Triangle opium, rerouting it into U.S. ghettos in the first hits of the program Catastrophe. William Burroughs simulates a meltdown of white man face as his colonial dams collapse and floods wash away his entrenched encampment. When I closed my eyes, I saw an oriental face, the lips and mouth eaten away by disease. The disease spread, melting the face into an amoeboid mass in which the eyes floated, dull, crustacean eyes. Slowly a new face formed around these eyes. A series of faces, hieroglyphs, distorted and leading to the final place where the human road ends, where the human form can no longer contain the crustacean horror that has grown inside it. Meltdown in your face. 27. He breathed in deeply and whispered, "Finish it, please." As if by response to his request, the executioner took the largest knife from its case and with one swift stroke, cut Lee's throat just below the strap. The death of 1,000 cuts had taken exactly 27 minutes. White out.